Calling to order the Charlotte Select Board meeting Tuesday, March 29th, 6:08. First item is to continue with the wastewater system ordinance. So how do you recommend? Do we go where we left off, or do you want to refresh us on how you incorporated the last changes, Dean?
I guess the only change I made in incorporating the changes was Article 7. Not yet. Yeah, there was sorry, Article 6, sewer rents.
Article 6, sewer rents, yeah.
So I think there was language Mary had proposed to explain the capital base rent and the maintenance and operation rent. And I guess to help explain how those are determined, I thought a little explanation of the budget for ABC is would be desirable.
So that we're on page 9, right? Wastewater Committee shall annually present to the commissioners a recommended budget. You're there?
Yep.
So this is a consolidation of all the recommendations and Mary's and what we had?
Other than that, I think the edits were pretty straightforward.
Okay.
So you can either, I think, go to, we left off at Article 9, which explains the Thompson's Point Wastewater Advisory Committee.
Article 9, top of page 12.
Right.
So that 901 defines who the advisory committee is. And it's been updated.
Why do you have Thompson's Point leaseholders or or representatives thereof? Why don't you just have Thompson's Point leaseholders?
Well, for example, I don't believe Miles is a leaseholder. I think he's a relative of a leaseholder. So they may want to designate somebody, you know, reasonably a family member. You know, I think someone like Miles is certainly extremely well qualified, and I was trying to figure out a way to allow him or someone like him.
Maybe there should be permission, you know, by the town to have a non-leaseholder or something.
Well, it says appointed by the commissioners, so that's your permission.
And we are the commissioners, right?
I'm just on this, on 901,
Yeah.
I mean, you write, is hereby established and created the Thompson's Point Wastewater Advisory Committee, and then you put in this acronym. But before that, on where you had us looking at the beginning on the sewer rents, you have it say the committee. And we should be consistent.
On what page, Frank?
On the top of page 9, it says Thompson's Point Wastewater Advisory Committee, and then it has committee.
Right.
And then on the top of page 12, 901, it doesn't call it the committee, it calls it the TPWAC.
Okay, good point.
So
Yeah.
it should be consistent.
Yeah.
Okay, so you would change one on page 9 and call it, what do you like better? Town
Well,
Square?
first time it shows up, you would explain the acronym, and then from
Right.
then on out, you use the
Right.
acronym.
So, if it- I mean, I would put it, I mean, if you're gonna do that, then on page 9, you would write the acronym there, I would assume.
Well, on page 3, section 220 is Thompson's Point Wastewater Advisory Committee, parentheses, TPWAC, is the
So-
committee.
So it's already on page 3?
Yep.
Yeah, so in other words, wherever it is here that it says committee, you should probably do the WTP,
Yeah, so we'll
whatever.
just,
TP.
so making consistent on page 9 then.
Okay.
So we can just use the abbreviation then?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm fine with the.
So everywhere in the document where it says the committee, we'll actually replace it with TPWAC,
Right.
which there's quite a few places earlier where it says the
I
committee.
mean, I
That'll
don't care
make
which
the
way it goes,
document
as long as it's consistent.
Yeah, it seems like if it's in the definition as TPWAC, that we would stick with that.
Okay, that's good. Okay, back to 12. Are we all right with the way it says representative thereof, based on this example? And we, the commissioners or the select board, get to appoint.
And I also made the town appoint the town officer as appointed by the commissioners. I think it had been deputy health officer, and Tom was the staff person. Janine was also the deputy health officer. She found it was too much for her plate, so it got, by agreement, I started doing it. It may be a time when I'm not doing it. It might be deputy health officer, it might be the town planner. It could be, any position, but it would be appointed by the commissioners.
Should you just say a town officer? And there are potentially of 2 or 3 in your office?
Well, it says one, I think it's the number 1 town officer. It's the number, for example, 2, 5.
I didn't mean, I meant the 1 stays there, just saying a town officer. A Thompson Point leaseholder. Well, it's fine. I think it's simpler the way you have it.
Well, it's just emphasizing the one written as a number and then the one written out, so.
1 town officer. Okay, I think it looks good.
appointed for the commissioners, by the commissioners, for how long of a term? Will that say? Their terms?
3 staggered 3-year terms. It says.
For the
No,
rest-
that's
yeah,
the Thompson's Point leaseholders.
yeah. But the town officer,
Oh,
I don't know, just throwing it out there.
So the select board member and the town officer would have a different,
We
have
tend to
have
do
a term in
that.
them.
We tend to do that annually, don't we?
You could say the 5 voting members shall serve staggered 3-year terms. And then you're leaving out the consulting engineer and the system operator. So the leaseholders, the town officer, and a select board member would all, be chosen every 3 years.
I guess the only issue is if you come into an elected
Right.
vacant, someone
What?
could, if someone gets voted off or decides not to run and they only have a 2-year term, but they were on this committee, that's the only sticky one, would be the select board member on a 3-year term.
We just appoint somebody to fill out the remainder. Just like, or you could do nothing. I don't really remember anybody being appointed.
Yeah, me either.
This is true.
I think leave it the way it is, doesn't it? Because we do have annual assignments, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'd say leave it the way it is. Kind of silent on it, and it's one of the updates, or make it annually.
Another one of the consistency things, I think in the beginning definitions, it describes commission, but not commissioners. Do we should make it consistent and say commission, appointed by the commission?
Okay, is there a commission? Commissioners is the by the Sewer Commission.
No, this is right. Because this would be, they're appointed by the commissioners.
Which
For
is
the
that?
3-year staggered term, we're appointing the members of the committee.
Commissioners isn't just fine though.
Commissioners is defined at the beginning. Right on the header.
The Board of Sewer System Commissioners for the town of Charlotte.
This is the Board of Sewer Commissioners for the town of Charlotte.
I mean, you can write sewer commissioners, I mean, if you really want to be consistent, appointed by the sewer commissioners.
Or you just throw in between 203 and 204, the definition for commissioner. You can say one of 5 select board members
So the commission is the 5, a commissioner
would be one of.
is one of the 5. I think it's all right the way it is, don't you?
I think it's
Yes.
straightforward.
Yeah. Okay.
So section 902 is where you can condense and get rid of Appendix A, which is that separate document, this one. Thompson's Point Wastewater Advisory Committee Rules and Responsibilities, because you've already defined what makes up the 7 members, and you just want to tell the world that their responsibility is to prepare the annual budget and with the fee recommendation to the select board.
I didn't quite hear beginning what you want to do, so
I want to get rid of this Appendix A.
okay.
I'm
'cause-
trying to condense and make things,
Well, I understand your desire for simplicity. Tell me what you want to do. So section A of that just re-identifies who all like,
Section 8, this has all kinds of, it has a lot of things that just are really, report annually to the Leaseholders Association and the Commission. Recommend changes to Thompson's Point wastewater. Propose adjustments to contractual responsibilities of the operator.
Is this Appendix A?
All these 11 responsibilities and dictating when your committee meetings are going to be, 4 calendar year meetings scheduled as follows: February, March, May, July, August. It's really, you don't have to be so detailed.
So basically you're saying get rid of this roles and responsibilities but.
Put it in
because
section
you've-
902.
Well, you've already got most of this on page 9 that was put in. You've taken this sewer rents part, a lot of it, and put it in there.
Well, you've just defined this committee, so it feels like you should have that section 902 after you tell everybody who the members are. And just the duties and responsibilities of the WP whatever are to prepare the annual budget with fee recommendation for approval by the commission. A quorum of 3 voting members is required to forward the proposal. The committee recommends proposed amendments to the ordinance, indirect discharge permit, leaseholder guidelines, and possible adjustments to the operator's contract. It can just be section 902.
I guess the thing I like about Appendix A is it's a really clear guideline for any committee member.
Who
They
has
don't-
ever written it? Who has ever read it?
I'd have to ask the committee members, but it's a separate document. What I'd see doing is taking all of section A out, because that's
Is-
it mirrors
Right, that's what I
901.
was gonna say too. A is totally redundant.
And then just have Appendix A really be a primer for committee members of what they need to do. Here, they don't have to memorize, have it embedded in the entire ordinance. It's just a one-page leaflet on
Add
their,
an attachment to this.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking
Yeah.
too. I mean, these committee guidelines, I mean, those are fine. I mean, you should meet regularly, things to discuss. It gives,
but to embed it in the ordinance, I think would get lost on committee members. I don't think it'd be as easy for them to access it if they wanted to reference it as just Dean could print out Appendix A and they could bring it to the next meeting.
Well, you would hope that they would be reading the ordinance since they're
Yeah, I
going
would
to
think
make
they-
amendments to the ordinance.
You
Yeah,
need to be familiar with the ordinance too.
familiar, but, I mean, we all know how much paperwork there is, and finding it in a 7-page document is gonna be that much harder than having a 1-page leaflet in their notebook. Yeah, I would think this seems more like a reference document, and this seems like a working document.
so I'm hearing you say you delete section A down to perhaps a majority of vote is required to forward proposals. Maybe you start it there, this becomes an attachment, then the committee meetings, and then defines what should be done.
Yeah, and on the back is, I think, doesn't need to be in an ordinance,
Right.
but it's, I think, all important information for them to be able to see.
And it's a guideline for someone applying for the position, kind of work that's going to be done. There'll be so many meetings. I think it's,
Is this something that has to follow the open meeting rules?
That's a good point.
I don't know.
Yes,
do we take minutes from the, yeah, we take minutes on Thompson Point.
there's no
so-
minutes posted. There's no agenda. Okay, so we just made that comment at the last meeting, that there's committees out there, there's no agenda, there's no minutes. And
I beg to differ, there are agendas and minutes, they're not on the website.
they're where?
They're not on the website, but there
Well, where
are,
is one supposed to find them?
hard copies are posted in 3 locations of the
How
agendas,
about hard copies get recorded like they used to?
of the minutes. As possible.
I mean, how is somebody supposed to know that what 3 places are you supposed to go and find minutes?
It's not in the roles and responsibilities, but
Well, I don't think they're any different than any other committee, so if other committees need to have agendas and minutes, then every committee has to have agenda and minutes, and they have to be available so that you can find them, just like you can find everybody else's.
Responsibilities
To what, have minutes?
to follow the open meeting rules
Yeah.
on put it on number
It
12
could be
on
in the
end.
first paragraph where the majority vote is required to forward proposals.
I mean, it could be,
Give me the first sentence if it's
Yeah.
the most important.
Follow open meeting rules. So, what I think I'm hearing everybody say is call this Appendix A, as it refers to right now in 902, get rid of everything on the top part of Section A, and then put a title on this, Appendix A, same title, get rid of the redundancy of the players, and then this follow open meeting law. And make it attachment to ordinance. Is that what most people are thinking? Fritz,
You're gonna have appendixes anyway. I can go either way. You could either do that or you just get rid of the redundant part and say it's 902 and 903.
Well, I would like to actually have it all in one document. If I was reading this, I think versus having to go and find Appendix A.
it would be in the
It
same
would be in the
document.
same document. Okay, very
It's
good.
gonna be more appendix, the next to read on, there's gonna be an appendix B.
It shows all the schedules, so
So
it's all attached.
So I'm hearing majority say that we'll have an Appendix A.
if you were gonna get rid of all the appendices, maybe it would be a good idea, but there's still gonna be some anyway.
you have the justice suit, you have the health officer here.
Okay, so we can move on?
It's on this. You take out the,
Well, we were going to eliminate all of this because it's defined right here. The same thing is defined right here. So
Okay.
what
Section
Matt
A
was
goes away.
suggesting is
Get
just
rid of
start-
all that.
Just start it right here. Follow open meeting regulations
Yep.
for any vote
Okay.
and put it, call it Appendix A, use the same title. I'd put a revision date on it, revised, whatever date we agree, 5/29, something like that. Okay, does that mean we can go on to Article 10? Powers and authority of inspectors? The authorities of the inspectors have, the powers and authority of inspectors. The inspectors, are you guys the inspectors or is the committee the inspectors? Who are the inspectors?
Anybody that's authorized by the commission.
So these could be professional, but isn't that what you are?
Yeah, I'm assuming, I didn't know if this is in, not the system engineer or the operator, if this was an independent source. So like duly authorized, so maybe Brian Harrington.
Was that a state representative?
He's a state representative that oversees the indirect discharge permit. You guys would give him the authority if you ask
Okay.
for permission. And I don't know.
In the past, it's been the health officer.
So if you leave this generic, if it's the health officer, if it's the state of Vermont,
I think you could get rid of the first section and just, in the second one, say be permitted to enter all structures or all property. Because the rest of it's redundant.
shall be, or you want to keep the shall be permitted?
So strike section 10.1. 10.2 would read duly authorized representatives of the commission bearing proper credentials and identification shall be permitted to enter all structures or on all property on which public sewer is located for the purpose not limited to inspection,
Okay.
And then it says the public sewer and get rid of lying within and say with the, what did you put on the front? With the, in accordance to the provisions of this ordinance.
So we're going to delete section 1002.
1001.
Well, it's
Either
gonna,
one.
the new one's going to be called,
Yeah,
okay. Then we'll start out with duly authorized representatives, you just said, of the commission.
so be permitted to enter on all structures or all property.
Why would they need to go into people's structures? That's not public sewer yet, is it?
I think that's like when you get a health officer, when Tom went around and checked like for garbage disposal, so
Got
that this section would give the town the authority to delegate somebody.
Is that
to do-
something we'd have to also include in the leases? For it to have teeth?
Well, an ordinance is our town regulation.
But the lease is the contract that the town has signed with, I mean, they own those homes.
The lease is about the land.
They're just leasing the land. And the ordinance, but isn't the home itself private property?
Yes.
So how can the ordinance legally permit us to enter their private property without it being part of the lease agreement,
Because the
landlord
structure-
agreement?
The structures may have something that is contributed to an issue with the sewer. The lease has nothing to do with the structure, nothing.
Right, I get that. I'm just, leases also typically govern landlord-tenant relationships. But ordinances, I don't know that they do.
Well, in this case, there's no, it's not a classic landlord-tenant relationship because there's no structure that the tenant is leasing. The agreement is that you're going to put something on our land, we'll lease you the land, and you have to comply with the following things, and we have to be able to make sure you do.
We have that anyways, because we have part of it which consists of the occupancy, the number of fixtures they can have in. We've already got all that in this ordinance.
So is there something in the lease that says they agree to comply with the wastewater ordinance? Okay,
But look at examples
then
of
that should cover it.
property tax assessment, look at examples of public health officer being requested. I mean, there are occasions where,
Well, that's usually state statute driven. anything with a public health
Charlotte
officer.
statute.
Right. So, but it sounds like if in the lease it says they're
Okay.
going to abide by this ordinance, then I think I guess we can do that.
Okay, so we simplified Article 10 to one section.
Are we keeping the last sentence of
An entrance-
1002?
If any unsaid part shall be done, so that the property is.
I think if you enter on the property and Steve has to dig something up, that he's got to put it back. Can't dig it up and leave it.
It's got to be returned to the way.
Okay, that sounds a good example.
I missed, Fritz, you said something in the previous sentence. Was there a change after repair and maintenance of any portion of the public sewer line within said property?
Instead, where it says the public sewer, instead of saying lying within said property, there you would reference, like you did above,
Structures.
with the provisions of this ordinance.
Okay.
Ah.
So that when you say provisions of the ordinance, that allows all the things that you're entering, either the property or the house to do, are outlined by the ordinance.
And delete line within said property?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay,
Section 1101, we can get rid of sewer and sewer commissioners. We've just been saying commissioners. Sewer.
you're just gonna make it commissioners.
So make it commission or commissioners, Matt?
Commissioners.
Commissioners,
There's
okay.
just no sewer.
And you have Appendix B.
So, now this refers to the guidelines for the first time, right?
Do you want to finish the ordinance first and then do the guidelines?
Well, I'm just might be clear, I'm on 1101,
Right.
and we refer for the first time to the guidelines. That's the 8-page document,
Right.
which we don't all have in front of us, or I don't.
And that's Appendix B.
And that would be Appendix B, right?
Well, I'd start with the first line where it says leaseholder policy. We're not calling it policy anymore.
Oh, what are we calling it?
Guidelines.
Right on article, right where it says Article 11,
Yep.
Thompson's Point wastewater leaseholder
The
guidelines.
subtitle,
But they're two different guidelines.
the heading, yeah.
You're right,
That's
you're
what-
right.
That's what we're calling them now.
Yep, you're right.
Wastewater system should be added. Leaseholder guidelines.
Wastewater system,
System.
okay?
It's going to be a two-line subheading.
What's that?
It's going to be on the second line. It's going to,
You can go 8 font.
Okay, so we're not gonna go into the guidelines now, but it refers to it, and we'll look at that at a later date. We all right to go to 12, penalties?
Ordinance capitalized, section 1201.
Ordinance, capitalized, okay. It's our ordinance, specific ordinance, okay. Anybody have any problem with the amount of the penalties or any of that stuff?
So the Article 8 is changed? Did I read this right? Or last time you guys got rid of most of Article 8?
yeah, it might be,
It violates Article 8.
might be Article 7 now. Or,
What is Article?
So Article 8,
It's a long sentence.
Yeah. I was looking at 1201, it just doesn't sound right.
What was Article 8 and why is it excluded?
It actually Article 7 now. It was protection from damage.
Protection from damage, so that should be Article 7, right?
Right.
What you just said? So Article 7,
Yep.
where it says 8 should be 7.
Wait, so Article 7 becomes 6? Oh, no, it's all struck. Okay.
It's-
Yeah, Article
Okay.
7's gone.
Okay. What did you just say, Franklin? What did you say?
I'm looking at 1201,
Yep.
and the just reads funny.
Well, wait a second. Article 7, protection from damage, most of it got moved to the leaseholder policy.
So you.
So that should be referenced.
So violate any provision.
801 is now 701, protection from damage.
So now your provision of violating not Article 7, but also the
Leaseholder policy.
leaseholder policy.
Got a lot of the damage language exported to it.
So these two places, you change that to 7, and then you also say,
Applicable sections of the leaseholder policy?
Yeah, that's where
Would that,
it appears a lot of the stuff moved to.
Sorry, say that again?
so section 803, 804, 805 talk about damage in the former Article 8, but they got exported to the new leaseholder policy language, is what it says.
Okay.
So we want to reference that in the exception in section,
And also in section
12.
1202, where it says section 8 again.
So I think that 1201 and 1202 distinguish between what you receive a penalty that's $100 in 1202 versus 1201, which is sort of a letter asking for compliance.
What's a reasonable amount of time in 1201?
so,
Sounds like we maybe need to combine 1201, 1202, and 1203. So any person violating the provisions of this ordinance except Article 8 and leaseholder policy. I guess anybody violating anything could be subject to a written notice, a fine, or the town doing the work.
So why don't you just leave, is that what you said? Leave section 1203 and 1204 and take out 1 and 2? I mean, 1203 is very inclusive of
oh.
everything you need.
Well, I think I see what Fritz is saying, is just get rid of the except Article 8. Is that what you're saying?
I'm just saying that if you violate anything,
Right.
you're going to either get a letter, a fine, or become liable to the town for the expenses and losses of fixing it.
Which
That's what
is,
says, that's what section 1203 is.
right.
It doesn't give you the option of a letter or a $100 fine, though.
Well, it says, without limitation, fines, penalties imposed by any regulatory body, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I guess you could get rid of 1 and 2.
so which one are you gonna get rid of?
1 and 2.
1201, 1202, just leave 1203.
Hey, I lost the bubble on this thing, policy versus guideline. So on section 11, we changed it to guideline, wastewater system leaseholder guideline. Do we have a policy too? Policy disappeared, right?
Disappeared.
Oh, so when Frank just said applicable section of the leaseholder guideline is what it should be, right?
Well, actually, we're talking about deleting 1201 and 1202.
Oh,
1201 and 1202 can easily be within 1203. 1203 covers what you want to say without 1201 and 1202. So 1203 becomes 1201.
1203 combines with 1201 and becomes 1201. You get, I mean, I'd still want to have 1201 to say that that you're going to write
Thank
a
you.
notice and you're going to give them time to
Correct
to
it.
correct it
Right.
and to permanently cease all violations, you go to give them that opportunity first. Then, and,
Then 1202 or 1203 can apply.
right,
So reasonable time should be changed to a 30-day time frame or 15.
Well, technically,
Reasonable, it could be
it
anybody's.
depends on
How complex it is.
what the cause is, what the violation is. I mean, if they're putting massive quarts of oil down it, I mean, that's something that's gotta be stopped immediately, and you can't give them a lot of time to decide.
And it could be an off-season thing where things aren't operating. I mean, which would make it longer than maybe a couple of months if something went wrong, as long as we're not polluting the
You know,
lake.
And depending on, like I said, depending on what it is, I mean, if it happens to be something that's minor, you can give them the 30 days or,
You can always give them a warning. I mean, if the standard is you're going to get fines and pay for costs and attorney fees, and you can say, well, we're going to give you a warning if you feel like it.
Right.
You can always be the nice guy. You don't have to write that in here, that you have the option of being the nice guy. I mean, the cop can always give you a ticket. Sometimes he gives you a
Right.
warning, and he's a nice guy.
But that's why we need 1201, so you have an opportunity to give them
I don't
a written
think you need to tell them that you have the opportunity to be a nice guy. I mean, there's not a speeding law that says, the cop can just give you a warning if he feels like it.
Well, it does also direct the select board of how
handle it.
this editing process wants them to behave in the future. And you might have a cavalier select board that just wants to raise a lot of money and start finding everyone for everything, and they don't even have to give notice. If we don't have 1201 in there, it doesn't force them to send a notice first. It seems highly unlikely, especially considering they're elected officials, but they're not going to last long.
So what are we concluding then?
Who knows?
1201? What do we conclude?
I don't see the harm in leaving it, but I don't see why we need to have except Article 8 or, change that to except Article 7. I think Fritz's point, any person found to be violating any provision of this ordinance
So you delete that stuff.
shall be served.
Okay, so you delete except.
So if they're dumping stuff in it, and they said, well, you didn't give me my warning, you can't fine me.
Right, yeah, I think the town should have to.
So there may be things that require instant response.
Okay,
I think
Your
I think that might fall underneath the health issues, which are another whole set of rules.
So, so if you're in the health rules are part of this ordinance?
Well, health rules are part of any structure.
within our
I
town.
State.
think in order
There's a
to
date.
fine and/or stuff in an ordinance, you have to say that you're going to do that. So if you say that I'm going to give you a written warning first, you might have something going on where you don't want to take the time to give a written ordinance, when it's pouring down the thing and into the lake. You don't want to,
Well, you could just write them a note saying.
Right, but
it
the
ceases
reasonable
immediately.
time for something that's a short-term thing might be a 24-hour notice.
might be 10 minutes,
I mean, it could be.
depending on what it
It
is.
all depends on if you have somebody like an excavating company goes down there and is just digging through lines, that becomes an immediate health issue for the health officer because they're not, obviously, they're not following the rules on dig safe and all that, and we've seen that before down there. So,
I don't think I want to be on the hook to have to give a written notice with a time period.
What if somebody says I didn't get my notice?
Here you go. But you didn't send it to the right address. They keep digging.
So what do you want to do? Get rid of it?
Just leave
Just
1203
by
and
commission.
1204.
I'd leave 1203 and 1204. I mean,
But did you get rid of written notice in 1201?
Yep.
Because remember, they're not going to find that written notice. You didn't give me one.
So what's the sentence in 1201 that we want? any person found to be violating any provision of this ordinance shall be served by the commission?
We don't want any of it.
You don't want any of it now?
We don't want any of it.
Down, just start with section 1203, any person violating
Okay.
any of the provisions of this ordinance shall
Town is in
become liable
control.
to the town for expenses,
Okay.
losses, fines.
Okay, so 1203 becomes 1201,
Yep,
and 1204 becomes 1202?
yep,
Is that what we've concluded?
yep.
Okay. If we can do this next section, we'll,
Capitalize ordinance in 120, new 1202?
new 1202 capitalized ordinance, okay.
We're almost done.
Okay, let's look at appeals, and then we'll finish the core document.
This, why do we have this? There's,
If it's going to the Thompson's Point
Water
Wastewater Committee,
Advisory
why don't it be in, why isn't it in their responsibilities and roles?
Well,
This is an appeal, though.
and I would think this would go in the leaseholder guidelines document.
It would go into both. Be
This
something
doesn't
that, it would
belong
be
here.
something that the Thompson's Point Advisory Committee would handle and something
Oh, I
that
see.
would go into the
As one of
leaseholders.
their rights,
Yeah.
as a leaseholder.
To begin with.
It should go in the leaseholder document.
it appeared in 2007.
Oh,
It doesn't need to be in here.
Yeah, I think it should be in the leaseholder agreement. Okay.
Is that what we want to say? Is that the right place for
Be
it?
in the-
As Frank said, though, it's also could be referenced in the,
Well, both should know about it, right?
Okay.
The committee should know what the appeal
just put in
process is and.
the next number, appeals, leaseholder appeals. So responsibilities, leaseholder appeals, under the advisory committee roles and responsibilities.
And then export it to, like section, parts of section 8, leaseholder guideline. Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
Go to the guidelines.
And then this information overall in section 13 becomes part of the guidelines. Is that what you said?
yeah, it go to,
Included as number 11,
no, it would be in appendix B.
right, but in appendix A, is that, the
Well,
lang-
Also,
Yeah,
but the language there is essential, is almost what's being,
which number in the?
11.
11 says review request for leasehold, for building adjustments. Oh, so you think that covers it? Adjustments, you could put the word appeals in there.
or review, instead of requests, review appeals by leaseholders.
Okay.
Okay, appeals, there you go, where the word request is.
And then just get 1301 into appendix B.
This goes into appendix B.
And if you could, I think I would put on this one here, on this 11, it says if you're gonna review appeals, you should reference the Thompson's Point wastewater system
Leaseholder guideline.
leaseholder guidelines.
That's an option.
Can I just call that one parentheses guidelines?
Okay. We need to stop based on what Paul says. So we've got a complete run-through.
That's pretty much it, except 2007 at the bottom of the next page.
Oh, what's it say
Update
there?
that, 2018.
We're gonna change that. We're gonna change that one.
I hope so.
So
I
that,
hope it says 2018 and not 2019.
okay, so we're gonna change those dates. Okay. So we have a final complete walkthrough we can look at next time, I guess. Who's going to update what's now called Schedule A, and where's that task fall?
I think that's Chris and Steve.
Okay. Next meeting, I'll have that updated? Schedule
Yeah, we
A1?
talked to Steve and Jake about updating the map and the leaseholders and the names, so. You can sit down as long as Steve can.
I'll have to sit down and narrate, because I don't know some of the names. 'cause
Okay. So A and B, no, A, B, C, D, D,
Going back to keeping track of the names.
Sorry?
Are we going back to keeping track of the names or just the lots?
Just the lots.
okay. So Schedule A1 and B1, you guys will take a look at for our next get-together? Okay,
Yeah.
the way it's laid out here.
Yeah, as part of the bigger picture, every fall, Steve measures all the septic tanks, and that chart actually references the last name, and some of those are outdated, so we'd like to update both. So at least we have an updated,
Let's just reference
the lot number. Yep.
Okay.
So do you, aside from the appendix and the guideline, leaseholder guidelines, do you actually want to see this again, or do you want it to go to the town attorney? Or do you want to review it?
Well, we haven't talked about the guidelines per se, have we?
Let's finish it before we give it to the attorney.
Yeah.
Okay.
Agreed. Let's finish it. Make sure we got a complete
Finish
package.
All the attachments.
Okay. The next part we're gonna look at is lanes, fees. You have that as section 304 that was in our handout, is that the way I look at it?
so it's a separate standalone sheet that.
Which will get embedded in the ordinance, though. Is that we all have it here, though, right?
So I actually, I guess just to explain it, it calls everything a connection fee, but divides it into two categories. One is the one is the construction of the force main and the connection to each lot, from each lot to the force main. And then the second category is the payment prorated of the original system. And that is, I'm just proposing to be paid over a period of 10 years. They could pay it off sooner, but they would be allowed to pay it over 10 years if desired.
When did what was the span of time the original? people-
20-year bond, no interest bond.
So everyone paid over a 20-year period?
Yes.
Yep,
And that ended when?
A year or so ago, right?
a couple years ago.
A couple years ago.
And so how are you prorating that? You're dividing the original amount by the new
Dave-
total number?
Dave Marshall, Civil
Yeah,
Engineering.
last week Dave circulated a summary of the original value and then the depreciation. I don't have a copy with me now.
Yeah, I do. It was the total value, $1,000,000, or something?
7.5.
1.75, it was the total value, it was the deflation based upon the government rates. And so it had each of the items, it excluded the individual connections because Land's Lane is paying for that individually.
Yeah.
And then it had the CPI, the Consumer Price Index adjustment
It
to
was
it.
depreciated first.
Yep,
And then it was escalated to CPI.
Yep.
And it came out to be about $10,000.
yeah, it's actually in the second, so on the second sheet that Dean put, connection, section 3, it was $10,328.
Section 3, okay.
So is this a good number for Ben Mason, and then everybody after that, every year, or whoever, whenever they connect, this has to be redone?
For category 2, it is. Category 1, I think Steve's indicated some tanks may or may not be suitable, and so actually that is a further edit I would propose in that second paragraph says prior to connecting. I think we might have to say prior to use of the system, because you're not going to know that until you
We
connect.
won't know that until actually Chris comes down and inspects it. We do a static test on that,
Right.
so we won't know until that is done. whether
And that's
it
the
will-
last step before,
It's one of the last steps before they hook on the system.
so how do you word that? Before approval by the town to use the,
I would say approval by the.
Commission.
The engineer,
engineer?
because he's the one that says yes or no.
Well, the only thing I would do to make it fair is have the prorated cost for paying for the system be the same as it was for everyone else, which would be over a 20-year period, instead of a 10-year period.
That's what Dave Marshall's calculation did. I mean, you know, Using present value of, I mean, they paid it over the past 20 years.
I'm saying that 10,328 should be payable over 20 years.
Oh, over 20 years?
Because that's what everyone else was able to pay it
I believe
over.
Tom Moffett said they paid $728 for the 20 years. So that was their chunk of payments. So,
$700 per connection for everybody.
yeah,
Per year for 20 years.
for 20, yeah,
20
I
years.
averaged it out that it was,
But that included what people are gonna be asked to pay for upfront, which,
there was a
The step
$2,000
tanks.
buy-in to start in the
Yeah.
original contract, so they had to raise some money, so everybody had to buy in, and then was the 20-year 0% interest,
so for these 8 lots, the buy-in is much more than it was for everyone else.
Yes.
And so I'm just suggesting that we stretch out, since the town's not strapped for it, the prorated cost for the system that's already been paid for. But they're gonna basically be paying back into the fund, the
They're gonna pay back
$10,000,
into the
and just do it over the 20-year period, so it's the same payment period. It'll be a lower payment, but they're paying way more upfront than everyone else did.
absolutely.
Because of the hookup part, you mean?
The 5,500 for the step tank, the
Where are you seeing that? I'm
3,600.
forgetting what piece of paper that's
Sir,
in.
Town administrator's report.
Oh, town administrator's, aha, there you go. Thank you.
So they're looking at $9,100 up front, and then a payment to pay for the whole
Some
system.
could be more if they're tanks, so it could be 12,000, 13,000, the initial hook on.
Which is, that's a lot of money.
Okay, so you're saying that 10,000 over 20 years, that's $500 a year.
What?
So 10,000 over 20 years is $500 a year. As you just said, they were paying 700. Yeah, doesn't matter too much. It's not an emergency.
Right.
It just goes into the fund.
Right.
And everybody contributed.
And depending on where people's leases are in the maturation process, it might not be the same leaseholder that continues to pay it. If someone,
Well, so
if
definitely
it crosses over, that payment would be continued by the
Right.
next leaseholder
Right.
until it's paid off. Is there some mechanism that has to go into the leases to make sure that that payment is continuous?
the new lanes lane leases are requiring connections
And to be paid based on some document?
in ordinance, the ordinance.
This ordinance,
Yep.
great.
So where are we going to document these numbers again? On your,
This connection fee requirement is section 304 of the ordinance.
Okay, the one, I mean, there's some of them that are known, the 10,328 is known. The connection fee is not known at this time.
well, we could do the prorata, we could would that go in this? That's. And then the other's a case-by-case basis.
And that could be described more clearly in paragraph 2.
Based on whatever the conditions are
Right.
of each property. Okay, so that then will become section 304, then goes into our ordinance. We don't have to have a separate document. To your point, everything's gonna be all in one little neat pile. Okay?
Just in this one page
Yep.
that we're looking at,
Yep.
kind of under the number 1, there's the word camp. We should probably change that to structure. Because it starts out the owner of a structure.
Yeah, each structure. Yeah, I might possibly suggest making them all camp, changing it wherever structure is to camp, because I don't know if there are any, but if someone had a shed, we're not connecting sheds, so we're only connecting camps.
I feel like somewhere in the beginning of the ordinance,
It does define structure.
structure, yeah, right?
Okay.
Because I thought that was a weird word to use too, and then it kind of got clear, section 219, or I don't know if this is the most recent one, section
It was 218.
218
Okay, yeah, all
now?
right, yeah, I think we did talk about that. It's defined as,
Any building equipped with toilet facilities for cooking.
yep,
So we're gonna call it camp or structure?
Structure.
Structure, okay.
Consistent with the rest.
Structure camp.
Structure.
You have the same thing in the next paragraph.
yeah,
Structure.
the last line, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, and then the middle of the third paragraph, each year over a period of,
20 years.
over a 20-year period.
Yeah.
Wow, we're really making progress here.
In less than 20 years, at the last end of this.
Okay.
Did you want to put something in here that says that that'll continue? Because it talks about, the owner.
Oh yeah, this obligation will continue with the structure regardless of changes to the leaseholder, something like that.
Isn't that a given, or?
Is it? I don't know. Given? Given?
Okay.
Well, it's just the same amount of time that everyone else had to pay for it.
Isn't that cost going to go down when other people who are hooking on much later hook on and that is recalculated? That 10,328 is not the same for everybody,
I think that's what
right?
it sounded like Dave Marshall did, was depreciated the system.
Right.
I think she said if you paid over 20 years, it's worth less than if you paid it over 10 years.
Oh, so that could change the number, you mean?
Well, if somebody hooks on in 2025, that would be when the system, the depreciation would be different than it is today, wouldn't it?
So we should recalculate that based on,
Well, did Dave 100% depreciate it?
No.
No, but that's a
No, I think they were looking at a set, so I think the ordinance was taking into account like a set fee now, moving forward, rather than having a fee that's fluctuating with the value of the system or the cost index. So I think it was more a matter of these X number of camps on Lane's Lane, we're setting a definitive price right now, and that's the way it is. Is that what?
Right.
And so that 10,328 or
He's gonna stay the same.
10,005 is going to be the
Yeah.
same, okay.
So if Ben connects now, it's that price, if they connect 15 years from
15
now,
years.
it's the same price,
Okay,
oh, here it is, right here.
or 10 years from now, so.
so then
Okay.
you could just put that number in here, couldn't you?
Oh,
Yeah.
they did the handout at the last meeting went right through the depreciation and then the inflation, and then they came out with the 10,328. Okay.
Just call it 10.5. Get it on.
Making money.
So anything more on this topic? So we'll
Yeah, just, the next agenda for June 11th, I guess, do you want to start early? There is a site visit at 6:30.
the next agenda, I think we ought to continue this till we get it done. I would start the ordinance at 6 o'clock. I mean, we could be close to done this.
Because on this, there's not much that has changed. A lot.
Now, we have to look at the guidelines, though, the 8-pager, I think, that, I don't know how, is that obsolete, current, or 2007, did somebody say? The 8-pager?
Part of this is the same.
I think it's just
603.
kind of regurgitating information for the leaseholders, but it's useful to go over.
Okay. So let's do the, on the draft for June 11th, have a 5:30 site visit, and then continue with the ordinance at 6.
Okay.
Okay.
So some of this is duplicated.
So everybody's good with that? Okay, thanks, guys, for coming in again. Enjoy that nice weather out there. Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Are there any adjustments to the agenda?
Nope.
Are there any public comments? Yes, go ahead.
As far as meetings and minutes and whatnot, what about the Thompson's Point Liaison Committee?
Well, we just said we're going to add, conform with open meeting guidelines.
Because that's the Thompson's Point Wastewater Committee.
Oh, what was your question then?
Thompson's Point Liaison Committee.
Oh, we have minutes. Should we post them? We had an agenda and we have minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, officially, it's not a quorum of select board or appointees, but there are members of Thompson's Point Leaseholders Association that, it's basically their meeting, they take minutes, and we can send them around. I think I did.
You did. You
Yeah.
did send them around. Or I saw
When
them.
girls such as myself find minutes.
You didn't see them?
I mean, again, if it's a committee and you're there and you're talking about things and it's Thompson's Point or whatever it is, it's no different than any other committee that has an agenda and it has minutes that anybody who has an interest could look at them.
Any reason why we can't post them then?
No, but it's, I mean, just to be clear, this is the Thompson's Point Leaseholders Association meeting that we attend. They take the minutes. They set the agenda. We can post them on our website. At some point, I think you should look into having clerical staff to post things on the website, because, which is good, more and more things get posted there. But it does become, a labor issue.
Does the Leaseholder Association have is it incorporated in any way?
They
Or
don't
is
have
that just a
anything to do with
name?
us, do they? That's their own,
Well, we have a representative there.
because
but-
they asked. I mean, we don't appoint
Well-
that committee, do we?
Are they a nonprofit? Do they collect
think they're
dues?
legal. I don't
Do
think
they
they're a legal
It's just a
entity.
name of?
Yeah, it's
a group
just
of people?
elected president of the association. I think it's an informal process, but we did have an agenda. I've been the rep for the last 2 or 3 years.
And they invite a select board member to their meeting.
Right, so the minutes come to us, it became a public document, we all saw it, if it comes back to us, it's public.
So if you were to present them at select board updates, then they would become part of the town meeting record?
Well, I think they're saying, post them like we do other minutes on the website.
I don't think that we can't. I just don't know that it's
Necessary.
subject to open meeting law. Because
And
I don't
and
know
if
that
it
that's
is,
a public entity.
And if it is, it would be subject for them to do it themselves. It wouldn't be the select board requiring it. It would be
They
their own
wanna do it.
association deciding that they were gonna follow the open meeting laws and post their own minutes.
Well, I think the liaison can bring back the minutes.
Why don't we do it that way then? That's fine.
That's fine.
But you guys all saw them, they came out a couple days ago.
So we'll just include,
So we'll just bring it in
Town
during
clerk on the
updates,
email.
that we had a meeting and,
Then it
And the
becomes
minutes, and then
documented
it
and
becomes-
part of the,
Select board, town stuff.
okay.
and then for you to find it, you just search the minutes? For you anybody to find it, they just search select board minutes.
And they can be a part of the minute
Yeah, that would be part of the,
as an attachment.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I guess just to clarify on Kath's behalf, you said they'll be part of the minutes.
Do we make it, well, they're suggesting making an attachment to the minutes that are put together at our meeting. Is that all
Becomes
right?
part of our packet, sort of, if you present them.
Well, yeah, being part of the packet, I think is different than being part of the minutes. I'd say.
Well, as part of the packet, that's on the website,
Right.
Yeah, then it's documented.
Okay.
I mean, it's someplace to find
so you don't
it.
have any extra work to do, because it's part of the packet.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Oh, 705 item. Approve issuance of request for proposals for computer network support and replacement of server. So we looked at this last week. Mary brought up the point in an email that why should we identify the equipment? We thought identifying the equipment would provide a standard that we found acceptable from SimQuest, and that would become a standard for anybody who wants to bid to use that, bid on that equipment.
Why wouldn't you want somebody to have their own standard and produce what they think? Look at the town and say, well, this is what's the point of putting it out for bid if you give SimQuest bid that they gave us for the hardware, and you put that in the packet, and you give that to everybody to bid on? That just seems absurd.
And then you have to somehow come up with a spec to compare them, which past my pay grade. Maybe you would just put a paragraph that would say they can substitute similar or suitable equipment or
It
something.
provides a standard of, I'm afraid someone could come in and buy a low market tech equipment and we wouldn't know the difference, whereas the equipment that we saw in the previous bid is HP, Microsoft, these are pretty much industry standards. I was thinking,
Just give them the option to substitute, and then they would have to justify their substitution.
Yeah, I like that.
Say this is just as good.
Or better.
That's their blurry idea, okay.
I'm just wondering if it should be a little more basic, because,
Thank you.
SimQuest is talking about a 6 by 600 gigabyte hard drive.
Right.
That could be something that could be recommended. But basically what you're gonna want is somebody to come in like SimQuest did, look at what we have, look at the history, see how much space we've taken up over the last few years, make a projection on what we're gonna need for the next 5 years, and suggest a system that'll work for us for this with our computer systems that are here, our desks, computers, to know that we have the licenses and everything that are needed for all the computers and the whole server setup.
So they have that with an option. They just say, the spec says it's 6 by 600 gigabytes. We think you need more. We think you can save money by going with less.
Yeah, but if you put this all out so specifically, maybe they're just gonna say, oh, this is what they want, and this is what the price is. And my goodness, everybody's gonna have the same price.
I don't know if there'd be as many people bidding on it. It
I'm-
was so specific.
Who's qualified to review all this stuff?
that's the whole point. And SimQuest already went through all of this, and
It's
this is what their analysis is of what we needed.
part of developing any spec for a bid is there has to be a standard to which they're held. You can allow substitutions, whether you're building a house or a computer system, but without a standard for which to bid, you have no way to fairly evaluate it. Unless you happen to be an expert in the field, which,
Which I'm hoping,
don't
if we
think
get
they
somebody
are.
here, that they will be an expert in the field. And that's what I'm saying, if we put it out there on what we've used over time and what we anticipate on needing, what they can figure out what we should need for the next 5 to 8 years.
yeah, and they can say.
And so
"This is
they can do the same thing SimQuest did. They can come in, look at the system, look at what we've got, look at our history, look at the number of computers we have, and come up with a viable option comparable to this.
How many
I'm
hours,
hoping.
how
Sure.
many hours do you think SimQuest put in to come up with this system?
They served us for the past year, so as far as developing that information, I think they were able to develop it because they had access to the server. I don't think we're gonna let every contractor come in and access our server in the same manner. I wouldn't think we would want to, but
How would you like to be SimQuest and having this put out to bid after you came up with this product to give to us, to tell us that this is what we needed for a server and this is how much it was going to cost, and now we're sending out the exact specs to all these different companies?
Doesn't seem
Like
like a
me,
level
if I was
playing field.
SimQuest, that would kind of, honestly, that would tick me off. It's like my product. I put the work in. I looked at what I thought that the town of Charlotte needed, and now you have taken it upon yourself to send it out to all different companies and see if they
We can get
can
it. That's the shopping
nickel and
around
dime it.
scenario that the bid process is aiming to avoid.
You know, you could use some of this, but you don't have to be so
Specific.
exact.
Right. And that's what I was getting at. You could give them an estimated size that would be, you know, from this, that you would need.
I think, Frank, if you want to, I'll say dumb it down, but make it more generalized, you know, I don't have the ability to do that. I don't know what level of generalization it should be.
Don't we have the rights to this? I mean, we paid them for a year.
Yeah,
They developed this. I mean, we could ask their permission to use it too, is another option. You did inform them that we're going out for bids.
yeah.
They're going, I just think that they've spent so many hours evaluating. We went through looking at the cloud, we worked with them, you know, over the course of a year. This is probably a pretty good spec.
You could add, for the first replacement of server section, the first bullet says source and install a replacement server based on the attached specifications. We could have language that says something like, source and install a replacement server based on the attached specifications or best fit substitution with explanation.
Yeah, that's okay. Otherwise, none of us are gonna be able to
Well, we'll be able
evaluate.
to buy their sales pitch or not, to a degree, and say, well,
Has disadvantage because their spec is going out to bid, but then they have an advantage because they've been here for a year and nobody else did.
and
So they're kind of,
yeah, and they can, I guess, sharpen their pencil too.
Which is one of our intents. So, are we all right with that, or you said
You know,
On the attached specifications or a best fit substitution with explanation within 3 months of contract commencement.
well, we want the price with the proposal.
Yeah, that's just, that's in proposal shall be submitted as follows.
Okay.
Those standards are all the rest of the bid. But as far as, you know, the spec for the replacement of the server, it gives them the latitude to look at the spec and then come up with
Oh, during the
best fit.
process, once they've been awarded, they may come back and say, I'd rather do this than that. Is that
No,
what
they
you're
say
saying?
that
No.
first.
They say it in the bid, and they explain it in the bid, that we're not gonna go with the HP
Okay.
6x600, we're gonna go with the GE, or the Intel 7x1200, because we get.
because
Yeah, and whatever the explanation is.
So everybody's good with going out with that, like that? Do we need a motion to release this, or are we? Sure. We want a motion? Somebody like to make a motion, Matt, what you just said with?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the Town of Charlotte request for proposals for computer network support and replacement of server for the Charlotte Town office as amended May 29th, 2018.
And the amendment's what's gonna be in the minutes that you just said. Okay. Is that seconded? Second. Any further comment?
I'd like to be sure that everyone that uses the computer gets to see all of the specs and, you know, not just a couple people, just like,
sure, I mean, once the bids
Everyone.
come in, anybody want, you know, we just put them out for few, maybe in public.
Well,
I just
you
want
know,
everybody to be
Maybe somebody in
included
town
in the
knows all
conversation.
this gobbledygook.
Okay.
Pick the energy committee's brain.
There you go.
Okay, that's good, that's noted. Any other comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Kind of a thank you for one meeting, you guys gave me the crappy chair.
You got the bad chair? The last one in gets the bad chair.
Damn, teach me to leave town.
Waive penalty for late homestead filing. We do this annually, right?
I'll make a motion to waive the penalty for late homestead filing.
Second?
Any discussion?
For FY 18-19?
Okay, yes, for FY 18-19.
Okay. Anything else? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Chittenden County Solid Waste District proposed fiscal year 19 budget. Good evening.
Good evening.
And if you'd help me with your name?
Yeah, I'm Kathy DeCaro. I'm Abby Folk. And Sarah sends her apologies. There was a conference in Washington on the paper, and it had to do with purchasing of paper, and Chinese. We're trying to stay really on top of those markets. So she sends her apologies. Thank you for having me.
Say your last name again for me.
I am Kathy DeCaro.
DeCaro.
DeCaro. DeCarreau.
Good. DeCaro.
Okay, and I'm the Director of Finance for the district. Have been for the last 8 months. So I just want to read Sarah's kind of introduction. So the district is technically a municipality. We operate under a charter in the state of Vermont because of Act 78, and we implement solid waste management mandates legislated by the state of Vermont. We encompass all of Chittenden County. We are the largest district in Vermont. Because of that, we have 156,000 residents, 6,000 businesses that we serve as we go about doing our daily business. We are governed by a board of commissioners, so you all appointed Abby. Each town appoints a commissioner, and we meet roughly monthly. And that is your voice on our board and helps us keep in tune with your desires, needs, and make sure you stay informed about what's going on. Our mission is to reduce and manage solid waste generated within Chittenden County in an environmentally sound, efficient, effective, and economical manner. And as you can imagine, those four things often compete with each other, and we experience that a lot lately. I'll go into that a little bit. We employ 50 people in administration, finance, facilities, hazardous waste, and waste reduction. So we run, we probably run into us, we run the drop-off centers where you can take trash in the area. We have an environmental depot that handles hazardous waste. I think we're going to be in Charlotte at some point in the next few weeks, so folks in July. So you have something hanging around your basement that you don't know what it is. That's a good place to go with a rover. We own, but we do not operate the materials recovery facility. That's what deals with all the recycling in the area. We have a contract with an operator, but we actually own that. And we run Green Mountain Compost. So we just about anything you would throw away or get rid of, we somehow figure out what the best thing to do with that is and dispose of it or bring it on to its next life. So as part of my mandate working with our finance committee, we've been reworking our finances and really trying to dig into what is the new Chittenden solid waste, what's the new issues that we're going to have to deal with, and how do we best organize our finances to support really good decision making. So we've been doing a lot of work. I don't know if you noticed the packet changed this year, and it should change again next year. We're trying to make it simpler, a little more readable, but also really provide information about what things cost so we can make good decisions going forward. Couple things, as you see, our revenue is projected to be $11,131,000. Our expenses, $10,597,000. The difference between those two numbers gets contributed to our capital fund. So each year we contribute a little bit, and sometimes we don't spend as much as we contribute. This year, we're going to spend a lot more than we happen to contribute because we have saved over the years and we can do some work. We're going to spend about $1.75 million on capital. That's largely because we need a new baler at the material recovery facility to take all that stuff and turn it into blocks that can be put on shipping and we can ship. And we also need a new, that's a $730,000 piece of equipment, and we need a new tip floor. So we've been able to get ahead and pay cash and avoid financing. As, I don't know if you folks know, but when we take on financing, that's our members taking on that financing collectively, so we've been trying to avoid that where we can, and we've been lucky to be able to do that. Big thing, there is no increase in the solid waste management fee. That's the fee that the haulers pay by ton to get rid of material. So anything that gets thrown away, we get $27 a ton for, unless it's there's other pieces of it. We get a fee. That's not going up. The drop-off centers, we're not proposing any changes in those fees at the moment. And we're not going to do any municipal assessment. Some of these districts are funded by per capita contributions, and we're not planning to do any of that. So we're not planning to cost any funding.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
So you say, I'm looking at your solid waste management fees, 3,024,000.
Yep.
You say there's no change in it, but there's a 4% increase. Does that mean just because there's, expect more customers then?
We, right now, we're running close to generating 3.2 million this year. So, and though we plan to spend 2.9, so we raised the tonnage. So we're going to charge the same, but we expect more tons than we had projected. So we went up 4,000 tons. That's the difference. Okay, good. We changed some fees for tipping at Green Mountain Compost. That's the fee the haulers pay to drop stuff off. We changed that last year. We're not planning to change any of that this year. What is changing is the tipping fee at the material recovery facility. That's recycling. We charge, at the moment, it's now $24 a ton for people in the county and $50 a ton for people outside of the county to bring recycling there, where we process it, sort it, and distribute it. So the way recycling works is you get all of your materials in, you sort it into marketable buckets, so plastics go somewhere and metals go somewhere else and everything goes somewhere. And we fund that whole operation by what we can get on the sale of those materials plus that tipping fee. And we've been running really, really well with high commodity rates. So what we've been selling that at has been extraordinary. And paper was, I think it was November was 75 bucks a ton we were making on paper. It's now costing us about 50 a ton. So we had to make up that somewhere because that's a huge loss. We don't know where the bottom of that is. This is based on the Chinese strategy. China has announced that they're not willing to take a lot of trash in the recycling. They want a very pure product, and a pure product that we can't produce. Nobody can produce it. Nobody's really producing anything with a contamination rate that they're demanding. So the contamination rate, by the way, the contamination is what they end up having to throw away. So they obviously have an interest in what gets into those bundles besides what you say is in there. They have, I've been on vacation for 10 days, but the last I knew they were not taking any product at this point, and everybody's really struggling to find other markets who will buy or at least take paper. It's only mixed paper. And unfortunately, it's 37% of our waste, of what we see at the material recycling. So even though it's only mixed paper, so.
Do you have to compost it?
Not that I'm aware of. And now we're going into more technical stuff that the Director of Finance isn't good to know, Sarah. But as far as I know, no. We are working on other ways of getting rid of it, but unfortunately one of the options may be landfilling it for some period, and hopefully we can avoid that. So that's
There's
the,
an article about this in the New York Times today, or like over the weekend, if you just want a big picture of this is impacting, not only the United States, but markets all over.
basically,
And we're not very nimble. We don't have the infrastructure in our country, so.
we had it actually at one point, and then because the markets were so good, we aren't
Yeah.
doing it anymore. From what we're understanding, certain of those markets are beginning to rev up, but it's 2 years before we could expect that they would be ready to really take paper. So we're in for the long haul in paper. We still have to pay for operations there. So we've adjusted the tipping fee, and we will likely adjust it again.
You know what the adjusted cost is to landfill per ton paper? To absorb that in-house?
For us,
Actually, that, the haulers would pay tipping fees on that, so.
Yeah.
And that covers it
That-
entirely,
Well,
all the way
that,
to...
so it would become
Yeah.
a source of income, but it's not what you want environmentally.
Right.
Right, but
Yeah.
that income, that would outweigh the cost of
I don't know.
putting it in the landfill.
It's pretty expensive. The tipping, the actual cost is, I want to say it's north of 100 a ton. Don't,
Yeah,
I say
no,
don't quote me
ballpark.
on that, I'm saying that on
I'm
TV,
learning.
but the last I heard, it's pretty expensive to landfill, and, we've been working for several decades to not do
Reduce,
that.
yeah.
Clearly, that would be a huge step backwards that no one wants to take.
Yeah.
There's no cogen plants left, excuse me, around anymore. I think they went out.
Cogen and Trigen, there was a big, everybody was building
Burning
them
it,
for a
and
while.
then all of a sudden it
Yeah.
got cheaper to send it to China, so they all shut down.
Well, when you can make $75 a ton, that's a great thing, but unfortunately, you get dependent on that, and it stopped on a dime, right? It stopped, and it's been just dropping precipitously every month. So we were making $180,000, and now we're making under $100,000 on that commodity. That's the impact of that. So, that's where we are. The other thing we're going to start doing is charging for the blue bins for recycling. We've been giving those away free up to a certain amount. We're going to charge about $5 a bin. It costs us about $6, so we're still underwriting a little bit of the bin, but we are going to start recouping our cost on those.
So our towns disseminate those to, people, and you'll have to manage the fee
Right.
somehow.
And I don't know that Charlotte gets bins and then resells them or redistributes them?
No, we don't resell them, we provide them
Okay,
to residents.
okay.
They pick them up here?
Right. So that would no longer be free, so that's something as of July 1st to,
So, I mean, I guess this is a discussion to have, but I don't think we want to pay for them up front. I mean, I'm guessing, and then collect them. I mean, I think we would direct residents to go to CSWD to pick them up.
and we would sell them at all the drop-off centers, so
Okay.
they would be available at every drop-off center.
Right.
With those that we have at our homes, so they just continue as is.
You can continue to use them.
We have black market.
And frankly, those are not, we've really moved to, well, the haulers have moved to the curbside, yeah, so, and those are not great for curbside because everything blows all over the place, so that's what,
Burlington's doing away with that.
yeah.
They make great moving boxes, though.
They do. And they show up in amazing places. I used to work at the university. They show up in amazing
They
places.
do. They hold soccer balls, really, I see them all over the
Yeah.
place, yes. Multi-use.
So, and I have been on vacation, I haven't been following news, so I'll let Abby talk a little bit about where the legislature is, if you want to do it.
Yeah, well, there's just, I was going to comment on Act 148, and a bill came up in the Senate, I think it's called 285, and I'm not sure it's actually fully passed, I think it is, but,
It was passed, but I don't think we know if it's been signed.
okay.
That's the last thing news
So
we didn't
it
know.
was passed, but we don't know if it's been signed, and it was changing the requirement of haulers to offer curbside organics hauling from, which had been already delayed from July 2017 to 2018, and now it's being punted down the road to 2020. with the proviso that haulers and stakeholders sort of meet to talk about getting ready for that and looking at their own infrastructure, but as well as where the capacity in Vermont of the materials to be handled. So, but the onus to, or the responsibility to divert food scraps from the landfill is still there on households by 2020. So household generators of food scraps and yard waste are going to be responsible to keep it out of landfill. And I think the Agency of Natural Resources can work with solid waste districts on the paper issue. If it needs to be landfill, there can be a waiver. And I think that was it. That's what I remember.
There was some ability to charge for recycling.
Recycling, which
and
is
that was-
actually important.
That's a big deal if.
This is Act what, 2?
Act 285.
It's a Senate bill. It's
Senate.
S285, I
Yeah.
think.
Okay.
So there's a lot floating around, and at the last I knew, we didn't know if it was signed or not, so I'm not quite sure where we ended up. All things considered, the expense side of the budget is pretty close to level funded with the budget last year, and
So I was reading your cover letter, so you're looking for us as a legislative body to vote?
you can do one of two things. You can vote and pass it, or you can be silent. Either one supports it. Obviously, we are always grateful for a show of support, but you can choose either. We have 45 days from the time that our board passes it to get through all of the meetings and have you folks pass it, or at least make sure you know what's in it as members.
So the short version is nothing much has happened except for the paper market.
There's a lot under the scene. We continue to work really hard on compost and try and figure out what's the best thing to do with compost. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. We're looking at how efficient our drop-off centers are and what's the best way to begin to work those. I think you're going to see us ask an awful lot of questions about the items we've had that have worked fantastic for the last 20 years, and we want to make sure they work fantastically for the next 20 years, and that may or may not look like it has. And so we're taking a really careful look at a lot of our services and trying to make sure we're continuing value and effectiveness and efficiency.
Do the different counties' solid waste districts convene and work on these collectively?
Yes,
What does that look like?
group of all of the districts do meet on a regular basis. We are looking at a finance system. I went down to Central Vermont, so we talk to each other on multiple levels.
As you may or may not know, there was a look was taken to site a facility here, and we didn't quite find a good spot.
Right.
And Heinsberg, I guess the question is, what's the status of Heinsberg?
Good question. Right now, we're waiting for Heinsberg to finish. Let me just back up just a tad for those of you who don't know. We do not own land, so all the land we operate a drop-off center on is town land. And so Heinsberg had land. We were behind the Public Works facility. They wanted to expand, so we had to get out of the way. And so effectively, we're out of the way. Once Heinsberg is done that process, I don't think we're planning to be open in, at least before winter for sure. They have to finish their process. We look at what land is left and figure out how we can configure on that property. So that's a long way, and it's really difficult to plan until you really know and can see what's going on. So we're waiting for that to be done, make sure we can do that well. What we don't want to do is create traffic backups onto main highways, which is an ongoing problem in a couple of these facilities. So we're really trying to make sure we know what we're doing, get a good look and plan so that we're not.
That's for 116, the intersection?
That one's
I think
know
with
where
North.
Lions-
It's on
North Road.
Bleecker, Beecher?
Beecher Hill Road and
Which
North
is off
Road.
North
Yeah,
Road.
yeah.
And then it kind of dumps to
Yeah.
116 at a
Yeah.
weird corner there.
Yep.
So there's no
Yeah, there'd be no,
request for Charlotte, I mean, the areas are
There
covered.
is no, yeah, not that I know of.
Is there a motion to approve the budget?
I'll make a motion to approve the Chittenden Solid Waste District fiscal year 2019 budget as presented.
second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have the finance person here, right?
Well,
Thank you, Abby.
so-
Okay. Next item is the highway permit, Dave Skirmahorn. You had a handout, Dean, does that change anything? Hi, Dave.
Road Commissioner inspected it and has a recommendation, or at least a review of the site distance. Actually, it's on the table. Recommendation is 15-inch by 30-foot culvert. Site distance to the west is 500 feet, to the east is 260, but there's a stop sign and light. It's posted at 30 miles an hour.
Okay, anybody, do you have anybody have any questions or a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the highway access permit for David Schemmerhorn at 383 Heinsberg Road, permit HAP 18-08.
Second.
Okay, and Junior, you've weighed in on this per the conditions?
Yes.
Any comments, discussions? Looks good to you? That's what your request is? Yes. Yep. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
That was easy.
Thank you very much.
Joe or Emily Donegan? Oh, hi. Any comments or?
The no culvert is required. Site distance to the west, that's the true west, is 300 feet. To the east is 400 feet.
Oh, so the requirement is what?
No, I'm sorry. I was making a little joke because out of the site visit, I mixed up east and west. Posted at 35 miles an hour. Site distance to the west is 300 feet and to the east is 400 feet.
So then that's acceptable.
It's close. It's a little bit less than desired.
What's
Show you how fast they go in that road.
what's it supposed to be for 35 miles an hour? What's the required distance for 35 mile an hour speed limit?
350 is desired.
And that's what it's posted at.
For 35 miles an hour, it would be 350. We're getting 300.
Oh, I see.
There's no real way to get any more.
I don't know whether there's any possibility of a T so you can so you don't have to back up onto Carpenter. Is that?
Like making it bigger, so you can kind of like loop in.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have to go out there with my surveying tools.
Not without losing a bunch of trees, I didn't think.
Yeah, it says planning to remove trees. There were two trees that were
Still there.
that were stumps that were in where the,
Right, we just cut those, so that was what I was talking about in the application.
Will that change the visibility, the distance?
no.
It's just overall visibility.
Well,
Better.
when you're going to the east, the road curves. So
Okay.
that's what limits your you to the east. To the west, you can see plenty. I mean, we were just looking at safety, that's all, because of the, we're trying to back out into the road.
Well, and some people back into their driveways on
That's the
short
plan.
driveways.
I mean, where we currently park, it's the visitability, I don't think it's any better, maybe worse. And we try to just back in, so that would kind of be the plan.
Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve HAP 18-07.
1506.
I'm sorry? Oh, at 1506 Carpenter Road, Apartment 2, Charlotte, Vermont. As described.
Second?
Any other comments or discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Thank you. The next item, Andrea Harvey, Revocable Trust, license agreement to locate utilities on Guinea Road, within Guinea Road right of way, under the roadway. Anything to add to this kind of standard? Any issues with this? Junior, or?
Have to be back at least 5 feet from the roadway. That's what they're showing there.
What are they putting in?
Sorry?
What are they running?
Utilities.
Utility line?
Electric?
Right now, yeah, could be telecom
So
or
it's power and electric,
power. Yep.
or power and communications. So there's 1 3-inch and 2 2-inch.
Did we do a site visit for this or no?
We did a site visit for the curb cut,
Not today, though.
not today.
It's great spot, it's easy.
And this is right next to the curb cut?
Yeah, it pretty
Yeah?
much is.
I just don't see the driveway in the.
Yeah, the pole is pretty much directly across from the driveway. So I guess the bore is supposed to be 35 feet to allow for
It's the right of way,
space, space on both sides.
you know, the town's right of way, driveway is. But they're not ripping up Guinea Road, they're going under it.
Right.
I mean, the power and utilities on the other side of the road, we don't allow people to put a pole up. You can't very well deny them access to power and utilities. I guess
I
you
think we
could.
would want the road commissioner to be there at the time of the boring.
What was
They should notify the day of the boring.
Okay. So is there a motion then?
Make a motion to approve a request for a license agreement to locate utilities serving 616 Guinea Road within the Guinea Road right of way, under the roadway, as provided in the license agreement for Andrea S. Harvey Revocable Trust.
I second that.
You have a comment on that?
I was just, you were talking about having Junior,
Oh, with the condition that road commissioner be notified
Sure.
for the boring?
Yep.
Okay. That's been seconded.
Sorry.
Any comments from anyone?
And do we need one person to sign it?
And authorize the chair to sign.
Yeah. Good catch. Any other comments? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Thank you. Next item is police services contract. You want to just talk to this for a second? Matt, it's the same as previous years, right?
Yeah, same as previous
Same
years. I think it's been a successful program, and considering the weather's been fair for over a month now, we have not been receiving many complaints by Front Porch Forum or email. So I'd recommend that we do this for another year.
So I'll make a motion to approve the police services contract with Vermont State Police for a total contract not to exceed $29,711.24.
I'll second that.
Starting date of July 1st, 2018.
That sounds great.
Okay. Any questions on the police services contract? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you. Water operator proposals, open bids.
Just opening, not necessarily approving. There was one that was emailed, which I can get off the printer if you want to see it.
So who's going to evaluate these?
If you want to have a select board member and myself, and then bring it to the next select board meeting?
Evaluate these?
Right.
So when is the start date for these?
July 1st.
Chevalier Water Systems. Are these one numbers or one number? So there are three prices. Town Beach Water System, $720. Town Hall Water System, $1750. Library Water System, $1750. An hourly rate for out-of-scope work, $75. This is from Lincoln Applied Geology. This proposal is $1368 for the beach, $541.50 for the town, $541.50 for the library, $65 hourly rate. This is VTUMS, Vermont Utility Management Services, Heinsberg. Where do you see the prices on the front piece? Okay. Town Beach, $1,670. Town Hall, $865. Library, $865. $55 per hour for out-of-scope work. This is really sealed here. Anybody have a knife? I got it. This is from Simon Operation Services. Waterbury, Vermont. $1,200 for the beach, $1,200 for the town hall, $1,200 for the library, $50 per hour out of scope. This one bid is from Roland Luxembourg, North Ferrisburg, Vermont. $1,000 for the beach, $700 for the town hall, $700 library, $75 per hour out of scope. So this should be looked at, make sure they're all certified. What's the board's pleasure on this to, you want to put a little, I'm not sure which, you have to probably look at the macro, the total of the three.
Right.
Take a look.
Does the board member want to join in that evaluation?
How much out-of-scope work did we do? Maybe just for a year or two, you could add that in with the evaluation of all these.
Oh, as an average, how many hours?
Yeah. Because they vary between $75 and $50. That's 100% difference, or 50% difference.
There's a lot of variation in prices. Does the board want to authorize the town administrator and a select board member to review them and make a decision, or you want us to come back in 2 weeks? I mean, I'm willing to sit down with Dean if you'd like, or Fritz, I mean, it doesn't matter to me. Frank?
What? Just do a little spreadsheet and put it up at the next meeting.
Okay, do that.
I'm fine with that.
So no action taken, just from the minutes, we'll decide.
We can look at it, good.
Okay? Quarterly reports from Fire and Rescue. Good evening, Tom.
Good evening, Mike. How are you?
Patrice?
Tom,
Dick?
Mike, Fritz, Carrie, me, Matt, Dean.
Everyone, good evening.
Go ahead.
Now, would you
Floor
like
is
to
yours.
proceed? So it seems to me the last time I was here for the, the second quarter report, we were, if I remember correctly, about 9 to 10% over budget. I thought, so this is in line, okay. So at the end of the second quarter, I think we were in the area of 9% over projected budget for the year, trending down. And if we take a snapshot as of the end of March, we're now, in terms of income of the organization, we're about 103.7% of where we projected the income to be, and we are 102.9% of where we expected the expenses to be. So the trend line has been towards improving and greater cost containment. If you take a snapshot as of the end of April, the trend is continuing. So we're down, down to about 102.7 at the end of April. And what we do expect is that we'll land the ship at the end of June, right on into the runway at very close to budget or within an amount that would allow the surplus that we've got in the system to absorb any excess.
Let me just get on the same page. So we're talking about the entire operating budget.
Right.
The front page, I'm looking at 75% of the way through the year.
Yep.
This is March 31st.
Yep.
So
So
you
if
should be
you
at
look at,
75%.
yeah, if you look at, you see that we're at the total expenses for the organization through the third quarter, we're at 77.24% of budget, which if you translate that to an annual basis, it's basically you're 3% over of what you had originally projected for the year. So in other words, if the year were to end at the end of the third quarter, we'd be just roughly just under 3% over in terms of expenses.
Okay, so I'm looking at income. Income is over, 7739, right?
7778 is what I have on
The
mine.
piece of paper I have is total income 7739. It's on the screen up there.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the difference is between these two reports. I see, yeah. So
So-
patient billing has been updated.
So you're 2.3% over, so that's good.
Right.
In income. So where was the expense now? Just to,
The expense, what I've got on my report is at 7724 through 3 quarters. So if you annualize that, we're at 102.9.
7724, why is mine different?
What is the second page?
7724, got it.
So if
Okay.
you annualize that, we're trending towards being just slightly under, call it 102.9% for the year. But the fact is, we've taken a lot of steps to control spending, and not the least of which is to, after many years of consideration and lots of discussion and meetings between various members of the organization, we have moved towards a reorganization of the leadership structure, going away from having a rescue chief and a fire chief to one central sort of unified leadership. And one of the reasons that we did that, one of the reasons that we got to the point where our prior rescue chief resigned, I believe, is that we called, the cost of his operation under question over and over and over again, to the point where it became just more and more uncomfortable for him. And that was, that marked kind of the end of his time in Charlotte. I myself personally got increasingly uncomfortable with what I perceived to be a lack of sort of fiscal restraint, and others on the board felt the same way. We kept calling that out, and eventually sort of came home to roost with his resignation. The bottom line is that we end up with an organization that's more streamlined, certainly more efficient, and more in line with what you see in modern day, 2018 fire and EMS organizations around the United States, which is a centralized, unified leadership. And that's what we got. We're proud of where we are, and we think it's going to result in a place that people really enjoy coming to work, and also a much more efficient and effective organization financially.
So how will you deal with personnel and the budget? Will it still be split, or?
Well, in a sense, there'll be an accounting of it on a split basis, but we will have one leadership team that is responsible for the total bottom line budget. And the good part is that within that budget, there'll be no competition, so to speak, between an EMS side and a fire side. There'll be one budget that one leadership team is responsible for. So we're excited about, what that means.
So was your question, Dean, whether or not, starting FY '19, you'll see the same breakout of fire and rescue
Right.
expenses?
Yeah.
Yes, because we do need to isolate those as far as personnel costs. There'll be administrative, and then the fire and rescue chief, who now has the title of
Deputy Chief of Operations.
his fully burdened payroll will land up under fire. So all the payroll that you see under rescue will be our full-time EMS staff and our per diem EMS staff.
So we're excited about it.
This is how Burlington operates?
This is how,
How most fire and rescues operate nationwide, Williston, Waterbury, that usually.
St. Mike's.
St. Mike's, usually the EMS is part of the fire department, and it makes it much more streamlined when you have one person to answer to. If the board wants to breathe down my neck, it's all my nightmare, and then I have to breathe down someone else's neck to make sure they're not chasing the overages to, oh, it's he said, she said, or it's your fault. It's all fire and rescues, it's just one line right on the board, pretty much nationwide.
So it's one organization instead of two different departments.
Makes so much sense.
Woodstock, Illinois, Woodstock, Vermont, you know, I mean, we looked in South Carolina, we looked in Colorado, we looked in California. It's the way it is. I mean,
Go together.
so.
The ultimate goal
Team,
is
right.
to serve the people in the community, so there's no competition now.
Yeah,
It's-
that's
We
great.
have one customer and you know, an EMS call, or a
I
fire
see.
call.
Yeah.
We're all there for the same reason.
The other thing we did just recently, and I credit Patrice with this, is that, you know, one of the bigger cost items on our, you know, consistently each month is the billing cost for ambulance. And we'd been using this service, Newport, for quite a while. Through her due diligence, we've gone through and investigated a new service that'll actually save something on the order of 3% of ambulance billings annually over what we're paying now. So it almost gets back everything that Montpelier, you know, started taxing. It almost offsets the Montpelier tax that was implemented last year. So
what's the name of this? So you're using a Newport billing service. What are you doing now?
Actually, Newport Ambulance actually provides billing services, but they're also their own ambulance service and operate two different locations. In conversation with a retiring Burlington Fire Department member, inquired who they use, because they used to use the VNA. And there's a company out of Wisconsin that solely does EMS billing.
And
That's what they exist for, and it's all about customer service. Did some research on them, looked at references, things of that nature, asked them for information. They came back, and instead of paying 8% on all our receipts, it's 5%.
Good.
He'll be coming out next Tuesday. He'll be on site for the day to review processes, not only with me, but also with the rescue staff, to make sure that our narratives in Siren, which is a statewide system that's used, supports the billing aspect of it. So we're excited about that.
one of the things that we asked in the new organization is we asked Patrice to kind of step up a little bit more even and assume a role of business operations manager with, you know, the day-to-day functions that entails, including the authority to help with decision-making and so on, and help with the overall management of the organization. Well overdue, frankly, in my opinion.
I have a question.
Yes.
I have a question on your budget.
Yes.
And she said yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I was just looking at the budget sheet. Looks like you transfer on the Barrows Fund to Tower 13,926. What's that about?
Yeah, what we do is we transfer out of the Barrows. Barrows is that charitable trust that distributes quarterly. And we make a transfer out of that into the Tower Fund to repay the Tower Fund for its, because we had taken the original principal from that with which to buy Marine 3. So we're essentially paying that, you know, it's really kind of taking from one bucket and putting it in the other there. But,
This is 0% interest loan.
yeah.
Any abnormalities in the budget? I saw a couple things were high, but it might be seasonal. Like, looks like fuel was high. Utilities are high, you're at 101% now on expenses. Is any comments to that?
To utilities cost?
It says fuel oil is 120%.
Are you in?
I'm in, I'm looking on, it's under corporate.
You're in corporate, where it would be.
Yeah.
The challenge we have every year, Larry, is that when we're putting together our budget, we're 18 months ahead of what reality is for when we first start spending that first dollar. And we always estimate that fuel, all of our utilities will go up by 5% based upon what our current actual is. The commodities market, as you know, and all the utilities, you never know what that percentage is. So a lot of that is just, what do you actually go with on your budget? Do you go at 5% increase over the most recent actual, which you know is 18 months behind, or do you go with a higher target and say that it's going to be 10, 15, 20%? It's one of those variables that it's more challenging to actually pinpoint.
I think we're running high on oil as well.
Yeah, the prices have gone up.
Yeah, the price has spiked. The good thing is the food heating season is basically over now.
My only question is that we got you have your income, and then you have your special funds income. It just seems like they should all be in one list. I'm just trying to wonder why they're separated. I mean, because some of the things that are paid out of that, you have your special funds report, and you have the funds that are taken in, and then you have the expenses. And some of the expenses are additional to expenses on your regular.
So once
list.
again, you know, the Barrows Trust and the tower income, the cash flow that comes from that is used to support and pay for items that are not part of basic fire and EMS operations. And therefore, we account for them separately. That's part of how our auditor expects us to address it, and this is following standard accounting principles.
Okay. I was just wondering because when I look at, we'll say, the building and office equipment, 51011, and I go back to the other page, I'd see 51011 building office expense, $175. So I'm seeing the same expense in two places.
Well, we use
Or not the same expense, but
Right,
the same
We use the same chart
category.
of accounts across all funds, so to speak, and I think the town probably does similarly.
It's GAAP, generally as, approved accounting principles.
So bank charges are bank charges regardless of which fund the bank charges are hitting.
It just seems like there's basically two sets of accounts, I guess. So you got two budgets going on, and they overlap.
It's the same standard accounting verbiage, but anything related to special funds are enhancements to the operation, not typically in our ordinary operating budget. I don't know if you can think of an example, but we used it, for example, to buy the rear doors onto the station that are currently, that Fritz, with his own personal labor, is installing.
Partway, not done yet.
It's going pretty well.
That was an item we had originally designed into the station in 2000 and whatever when we built it, but didn't have the money to begin with. So we, instead of approaching the town for the money, we take it from these special funds. Another example of these special funds, why they're separate, is we don't always know what's coming in on these. You're patient billing, you can get an average. On your program services, that's usually the billing we do for hazmat incidents or classes we teach. We can't ever figure what the amount is going to be. Or last year, I had a private donor that wanted to buy specific equipment for the department. So that's why they're kind of not mixed, because you don't know if this year someone's going to give you $10 or $20,000. So.
Does that make sense?
I understand, I prefer more streamlined. You know, all income goes in one area and all expenses go in the other. I mean, because wouldn't that would adjust what the town appropriation would have to be.
One's capital and one's operating expenses.
Yeah.
The town capital for the fire department is also separate account for accounting purposes.
It sounds like what you're saying, Frank, in a roundabout way, is that you want the charitable funds to reduce the town's contribution, the town appropriation for operations. And as we've talked over and over and over again, it's a private 501c3 organization that's received charitable donations, just as the library has and the senior center. And town doesn't tell them how to spend their money. We think we've made prudent use of that money. Things like new beds, new mattresses, doors to the back of the building, which probably we could have argued is an operational need that's sort of basic fire and rest, basic to the town's responsibility. We didn't take that approach. But it comes down to, it's a private organization, and these were charitable donations made by private individuals for funds that were earmarked for enhancements, not basic operations.
Not to kick this into the ground, but Friends of the Library, Friends of the Senior Center do list often the purchases that they make with their private funds.
And we do too. I think it's on, we make that available, do we not? It's on our capital list.
So when you get the inventory.
In the year, okay, the year, yeah.
it shows where-
Yeah,
where it's-
that is true.
where it comes
Yep,
from, where it's
yep,
funded.
that's true.
So like the town, for instance, when you upgraded your computers, that all came out of your operating expenses. The board and the members just recently approved new computers.
And it's not coming out of operating expenses.
It's coming out of special funds.
It's coming out of Tower. Tower was, a communications, it's a communications tower. We're using it as a source of cash flow for things as basic in a way as radios for our volunteers.
We just in order to upgrade the radios for some of the fire officers and to equip the new engine that the town has bought with radios and technology that's needed, and instead of bringing that out of budget or asking for more money in a bond, we're doing that out of the tower fund. So it all rolls back into, I pay taxes here too if we want the best bang for a buck we can get. And plus it also not being rolled into that fund. Like I explained to the board before, if I go for a grant, I don't have to come over here and ask you ahead of time. Well, I'm going for a grant for $150,000 of radio equipment. Is that all right if I need a 20% match down the road? All I have to do is inform the board, this is what we have for possibilities for a radio equipment grant. If we get it, it's available out of the tower. Right now, we have applications out for $80,000 worth of grants this summer. So our matching fund, we would have to come up with the funds, and instead of every time I apply for a grant, sometimes there's as little as $1,500, sometimes there's as much as $250,000. Actually, we've done over $500,000 before we've tried for trucks. I don't have to keep bothering the board, but we're still getting the best bang for the buck for the people who live in town.
So Chief St. George made a motion last week to use some of the charitable money to buy a second nitrous oxide pain-killing, device for the other ambulance. One of the reasons for that is that in our perfect world, we'd be able to have and provide the same level of paramedic service to the town that we have, in recent years, without having to go hire a full-time paramedic that we got to pay benefits for. We want to try to accomplish it on a per diem basis. Remember that in order to give out narcotics or whatever pain-killing narcotics, you have to be a paramedic. The nitrous oxide system for pain-killing doesn't require a paramedic status, so having a second unit puts us in a position to be able to provide more pain management with less full-time paramedics on staff, which again, I think is a cost-saving strategy. So.
There is one nitrous oxide in the town capital for FY19. This is the second, so both ambulances will be equipped the same. So we could have actually come to the town and said, we need two. But we're asking the town to do one and the other's coming out.
Dean mentioned inventory. Has the select board seen an inventory for a while?
I wondered what that was.
Maybe the next quarterly meeting, we could have the,
It's updated annually, so I think the last one
Yeah.
Dean got was September of last year.
And did we see that?
It's part of the audit.
It's part of the annual audit.
Does that include what gets disposed of during the year?
Yeah.
it might be good just to bring a copy of that and walk through it at the next quarterly meeting with the select board, because
We are making strides thanks to Patrice and Rob that a lot of our audit is going to be, equipment will be bar-coded and tracked that way. So it makes it that much easier for short-handed volunteers to track everything. So they'll be able to take a snap on their phone that that item is there or in service or broken, and
I think it'd be good to update the select board on the inventory and a couple of new programs for
the
the,
processes that we're using. Yes, we can easily do that the next time we come.
Like Halligan?
yeah.
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 Any other questions? Thank you, folks, for coming in.
Thanks for having us.
Yep.
I know my young firefighters that come in are awful happy to be doing what they're doing right now. It's really a pleasure because I saw them at 14, couldn't wait, right, 9, whatever, couldn't wait to be on the fire department. And now they're there. And I found myself one night at about midnight, almost midnight, not being able to, my car was parked way away from the store. And none of my neighbors were there. So I was like, texted a few friends, are you up by any chance? Because then we could talk on the phone while I went to the car. So I was like, what the heck, who am I going to call? I called Zach Trono. He's up, oh yeah, sure. I said, so listen, all you gotta do, I'm gonna unlock the door, I'm gonna walk out. And when I'm safely locked in my car, we can hang up. But he did just that, and I guarantee you I will call him any time of the night if I feel I need to have that kind of. It was great. It really was.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yep.
The maturity in some of those young men is unbelievable.
Unbelievable, I can see it, yeah. Yeah, I remember Trevor when he was definitely 9 and talking to him about being a firefighter. Now look at him today, and it's cool. And they think it's going really well too.
It's also good to see you guys at the Virgins Memorial Day Parade.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for coming in. Mount Follow State Park comments?
So I don't have it here, but I did want to email it to everyone. I thought the workaround I could do is to have it be signed the following Charlotte Select Board members and the undersigned. And then I would post at the Front Porch Forum with a request that people email me or Dean, either one. Yes, so we saw this model with the neighborhood signature complaint where it wasn't actually signatures. It was just a list of people's names who agreed to the undersigning. And if they sent an email to Dean or me that said, yes, I agree with that letter, then I can attach all those names to the letter.
I have people sign it at the store if you wanted.
Yeah, and so
There's a
tomorrow
way to
I
make
would,
that
so I could send that
easier.
out tonight and then have a copy here and a copy at your store tomorrow. I drop it off at the
So
old
like
brick
in the
store.
form of a petition kind of thing, is that what you're saying?
Right.
So tell me about the letter. So we had some inputs. We talked, Steve Kieran, I think, was here last time and had an input, pretty
Substantial.
detailed, good.
Detailed.
How do I compare what you've done? Have you used that as a template or?
Basically using that and trying to have it be a little less granular, but get all of his points into 6 or 7 paragraphs. I'm trying to get it down to 2 pages.
So this is due according to the plan, the end of this month, which is a couple days away.
Yeah. So it gives us 2 days to kind of collect numbers and hopefully Front Porch Forum, if it's as active as it is, I think we can get dozens of
So I'll have
signatories.
signatures in some form to go with this and then electronically submit it to,
the Parks and the
Okay.
Parks Department.
any thought of submitting Steve's or endorsed by us, or is that kind of a separate from what you're doing? Or he could submit it himself.
He could, and we could email him and encourage him to.
I mean, I'm happy to do that. He's in touch with me.
That would be great.
So I'll do that. Okay.
The Mount Philo hill climb.
Yeah,
Is that
there's a
referenced?
paragraph in there on accessibility being the goal. Part of that, the paragraph basically is talking about not restricting access based on the numbers, and not restricting school groups, and allowing access to all citizens 2 days out of the year for the historic hill climb.
Nice. And weddings.
I didn't address the weddings. I think,
Is that part of the?
I don't think they're restricting, yeah, I don't remember something restricting it, but they, it's still open to be scheduled for weddings.
For me, in the overall opening paragraph or summary, a better balance between recreation and ecology and habitat. It was very strong in the ecology habitat at the expense of recreation,
Public use.
So to me, if
Okay.
that's the
Balance.
message, I do think we need more parking. Don't think we need road signs of no parking on our towns. I mean, that's
That's right.
very difficult for us to enforce. And so anyway, more of a balance toward recreation.
The portalets are fine. We don't need fancy bathrooms. Portalets are fine.
You mentioned the original use, or the donation was for recreation.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point.
That was in Steve's letter, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, if they can limit recreation, but I don't know the terms of the original contribution, that may nullify it. Who knows? I never got into it much, but is that meant, as long as that's mentioned.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just a few days ago, I saw 2 buses there, school buses.
Well, it seems like until a long-range management plan is changed, they're not going to change, because I saw 4 rows of cars parked on the lawn to the right.
There was 2 buses parked on the lawn.
On the lawn also. So, they're not implementing any of the draft plan yet, which is nice, at least this season. And hopefully they take,
Okay.
So, do bus loads of children come down from like Milton, being that that's Chittenden County for?
I don't know
The day, I wonder if they come
where those
from that
buses were
far.
from.
For example, Milton, or just wondered if it was all the schools in Chittenden County, they use it.
Well, just take
How
a
fun
Harrisburg.
would that be, how fun, long bus ride and get there to the beautiful mountain.
I'm just wondering, in terms of form, whether you just want to make it a letter from the select board, and that carries its weight, rather than try to get signatures, and a lot of effort goes into that, and a couple of days, it's hard to know how many signatures.
Well, the way I kind of phrase it is the Charlotte Select Board is presenting this,
Yeah.
but it's signed by the following select board members and,
Yeah,
so that it is,
both,
right.
select board and.
Okay.
You're gonna send that tonight or tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll
sometime?
email that to everyone tonight.
So we So are we physically going to come in here and then sign, you'll have it on Town of Charlotte stationery?
Yeah.
I think it should be, and then with our signatures, and then, as you said, an attachment, additional community
Any other
members.
names that, yeah, respond.
So we should come in and sign it tomorrow or next day.
Yeah, the
So it gets
31st.
out, and then whatever we get through, you're saying Front Porch Forum or the store or here, we can add those lists to the,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. Everybody good with the plan? Okay. If you see in the packet this picture, this bench is on the property of the Berry Farm. It's a bench from the trails, and all they're asking for in the letter here is a waiver of their being liable if there's an accident, and the town would assume liability. Seems pretty straightforward to me. Do you guys have any questions? Do you agree with it? Is there a motion to have me sign this and submit it?
You sent them the insurance certificate I see here?
Yep.
Okay. Sure, I'll make a motion to approve this liability waiver to the Berry Farm for the bench on the town trail.
And authorize the chair to sign? Or does no one have to sign it?
That sounds like a
Yeah.
great idea.
Second?
Any further discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Right.
Aye. Next item, a letter from Peter Trono, conflict of interest. Do you want to say anything, Peter, or what's your thought?
I submitted a letter by Nick Letty, attorney that I hired. The reason I hired him was that I felt a little deceived by the board, I think on February 12th, when I came in for a meeting and brought it up for discussion, and I was told before I left to go to another meeting that evening that it would be put on the agenda and it would be discussed at a later date. It was actually discussed that evening after I left. I didn't think that was the proper way to handle it after I was told that it would be an agenda item at a later date. So I, with all due respect to the board, there are no attorneys on the board. I asked that we use the town attorney to give a quick opinion on conflict of interest. And by the way, it isn't just for Fritz on the fire department. It's I mentioned to you, Lane, that I think that you may be a member of the senior center committee. Somebody on the board may be a member of the library committee. It's not anything about Fritz. It's not anything about the fire department. It's what I just thought would be the proper way to handle it. Discussions that if you're on a committee that you not vote and not participate in the discussions. And I have no problem with, Fritz reporting back as the liaison to the fire department. I think you need that. But I'm not sure that a select board member should be voting on issues that are pertaining to boards that they sit on. And I've read some minutes, I think, Matt, that you had talked about conflict being a financial benefit. It doesn't have to be a financial benefit.
Well, the minutes weren't totally accurate, and the letter that McNeil Letty submitted talks about what my point was that it's either financial or non-financial of any, what's the language? Let me go to the policy here. Greater than any other citizen or taxpayer. So if there was some exclusionary committee that didn't allow the same access, that is where I think a potential conflict could
It
occur.
would certainly be a conflict, at least in my view, and after talking with Nick Letty about it, that I know there are some board members, or some fire members that do get, my son gets a W-2 form. He gets something, not a lot.
Is it any greater than any other citizen
Well,
or
but
resident
if
has the
you're-
opportunity to
but
have?
if you're on a board and you can make financial decisions, being a select board member, and you're able to make a financial decision pertaining to the fire department, and you're going to benefit from that decision, then I think it has the appearance of a conflict of interest. And anything that has, my understanding is that if there's the appearance, then you should recuse yourself.
Well, the last part is not what I read either in the state statute or what the VLCT sent back to us when Dean asked them about it. Recusing oneself is an option, but the should is really the question. And we didn't get the legal advice that should exists.
Certainly, you're ahead of the curve in having a conflict of interest policy. It's not required until July of 2019. There was one shortcoming in, I think there were 5 topics that you need to address, and the 5th one wasn't addressed. And I'm guilty of it from, as an auditor. I guess any elected official in the town is supposed to sign a copy of the conflict of interest policy and have it on file someplace. I know that's not being done.
For the life of me, I can't understand what possible benefit that I could receive for participating on both boards. Keep in mind that, for example, when some things come up with respect to, I have abstained on some votes at the fire department regarding financial things that have to do with the town. I leave that up to the other people to do it. The whole policy that we have basically relies on the individuals who signed the letter to abide by it. And I'm still, I mean, this talks about an advantage of financial interest or, what's the other thing they call it for? Personal advantage.
Personal or financial advantage.
And how can a person that is volunteering for a 504 receive any of that?
It's also great, the sentence is dependent upon greater than any other citizen or taxpayer. It's not that a direct or indirect financial interest or non-financial interest occurs. It's that it's at the exclusion of any other person. So
Yeah,
that's where the idea of
the
getting the
conflict.
stipend is one thing, but if the department doesn't allow people to volunteer, then I could see there's an exclusion.
Is equal to getting a stipend.
So that's where, the financial piece with the fire department, but the same, if the town didn't allow a certain segment of the population to run for select board, to serve on these committees, then that would be a greater advantage than some other citizen in town. And that was the VLCT's recommendation. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, short of whether an elected official has a conflict of interest is ultimately up to that person, is what the Sarah Jarvis, the lawyer for VLCT, wrote an opinion to the town. Short of a court order, no one can force an elected official to recuse him or herself from a given situation or decision. So, I think it's a good discussion to be having, especially I wasn't aware of the change in state statute that's going to require this by the end of next year. And so it'll be good, I think, to be ahead of the curve again in complying with the new state statute. I think it's something we should look at. But I don't see an issue currently, is where I was
There's a
coming
statement
from.
from VLCT, Matt, that says, the person's membership on a committee should not be the basis for recusal in the context of budgeting decisions, as long as the person is not making decisions about his or her own compensation. In other words, just because you're on the Fire and Rescue Committee and the Select Board, there's no reason to excuse yourself unless there is a personal gain for that person. And
That personal gain doesn't, that personal gain doesn't have to be financial though.
well, we understand that.
There can be other gains by a member of, and it happened to me in 1987 when I was on the Burlington Planning Commission, and I was a member of the Ethan Allen Club. Ethan Allen Club was coming in to ask for something, a change in the building. And it was suggested by the chairperson before the meeting that I recuse myself because I was a member, and I could benefit indirectly by having a new bar or a new dining room or improvements, that it was a personal benefit to me that way. Fritz might enjoy a new fire truck. He would have the ability to, as a board member, to, whether that's a good example or not. There are situations that someone and again, it could happen at the senior center. It could happen at the library. It's not an attack on the fire department. It's just
Anybody could perceive
yeah.
a benefit for anybody, for any organization, anywhere in town. And to use that person's perception of, I think there could be something here, covers everybody everywhere in the state. I mean, there's no end to it.
Well, I have three little things on this now before Tom chimes in. One, the W-2s that you talk about Zach receives are figured out below board level, so Fritz has no say in what happens. The chiefs of the organizations do that and how they incentivize future volunteerism. Also, reading this letter, I didn't know Schlott Fire and Rescue was a committee of the town. I thought they were a 501c3 that had an MOA with the town of Schlott to provide service. So I'm not sure if that even applies at this point. And third, I hope Fritz has the benefit of a new fire truck in town, just like every other citizen in the town of Schlott will have a benefit when the new fire truck arrives in town, just like when the old ones go out the door and come to your house. Fritz has he has the same opportunity to dial 911 being a member of Schlott Fire and Rescue as Frank has the opportunity to dial 911 by being a select board member, or Mr. Trono as being just a member of the town.
I guess I'd also like to add specifically, which the letter talks about the ZBA from the VLCT, but specifically I think this came up because of connections that board members have based on select board appointments and town structural organizations, versus your example was a private club approaching a municipality. So these are structural appointments that the select board has a responsibility to fill. If there was an inherent conflict in that structure, I think our legal counsel would have said something at the time of making those structures in the MOA document where it's required that the select board in the town has a voting member on.
An MOA also says.
That member has built a stronger bridge between the two organizations by the town having that member there.
The MOA says that if there's a conflict between interests of the fire department and interests of the town, that the select board member is supposed to prioritize that's not the word they use, but to prioritize the opinion of the town, which is why on some of the financial issues, I don't vote. And then there's the practicality of having every person on every community. Are they supposed to report these things? I mean, it's not practical. I mean, if every person would have to log their decisions, whether they recuse themselves or not, that'd be a voluminous reporting, and paperwork nightmare. You would have to rely on the people that sign the town's conflict policy to think that they're going to follow it.
I guess I'd also, the legal letter from VLCT goes on to say, but the fact that a person has a connection with an affected entity or person is not necessarily a problem. There's only a problem when there is an inability to be impartial because of such a connection. However, recusal is not always necessary and not always appropriate. Furthermore, unfortunately, accusations of conflicts of interest are sometimes used as a means to attack or undermine substantive decisions and processes. What is paramount is transparency, that it is made public when an official has a connection with an affected person or entity. And it seems like, after reading that and then rereading the town's conflict of interest policy approved in 2011, that's what the policy really aims to do, is have that come up before the board, have it discussed, and then have the individual make a decision. So I don't see an issue until I think we look at the new law that's going to require that conflict of interest by next year.
If I could just add one thing, or a couple things to Dick's. The CVFRS has its own conflict of interest policy, first off, that's published and it's in the Dropbox, which everybody can see. I'd also like to just corroborate that, you know, the meetings that I've been a part of, which are pretty much all of them, and Fritz has been there, yes, indeed, he does recuse himself from decisions and voting that has a financial impact or otherwise impact on the town. And I think it also, you know, when I think about what the organization would be across the street without him and what he does extracurricularly as a volunteer in terms of installing doors and, I mean, stuff that goes way beyond the standard, you know, volunteer fire sort of behaviors. I don't know, I guess I'll leave it at that. But I think, you know, if you think about it, Carrie, you have a store, what, in the western or eastern, you know, part of the town. I'm assuming that if there was some decision that came before the board that might benefit extra traffic that way, you'd have to be mindful of your store there. And Frank, are you still
Zoning.
You're still in zoning, and I'm sure you have to be mindful of that role in zoning and when you vote on things. So it's kind of across the board in many ways. So.
Small town, there's only so many people that volunteer to fill positions, and sometimes they fill more than one.
And again, like Matt said, with it being, the appointment of being liaison to different committees and stuff, that if that committee decides it's going to do something, they might think that's a conflict.
I think we've all got integrity enough to know when we're supposed to recuse ourselves. I personally think that from hearsay that I hear, that the fire and rescue is better than it's been in a long time. There's a lot of good things going forward, and it's always been good. I understand. Glad that you were there, but there's more to come. I think more good things. There's a lot of positivity
We're moving
on an upside.
curve.
Correct.
For benefit of the community,
Yep.
benefit of the people that serve. We always wish there were more of us.
I know, there's not enough time in a day.
There's not enough people, a lot of the people that volunteer, working 2 jobs in the community. So we're very happy for the ones that we have, and it's hard, the young guys. Thankfully, we've got guys like Zach and Peter
And they'll bring few of their friends will come over.
Unfortunately, like some towns like Ferrisburg, you have a lot of young guys that can afford to stay in the community. Except for this community, we know it's expensive to live in, and a young person is not going to afford just starting out to live here. And those are the people we really would love to have, but we've got a few that have families in the community, like Tronos, Dentons, my kids, that are coming, that do help serve. But after that, we've got older people, sorry, Fritz. And Tom, and enjoy the process and provide a better service.
Peter, you had your hand up?
We're concentrating on fire and rescue, and fire and rescue is not the issue here. I'm wondering, how do you handle matters at the senior center, Lane? Are you still on the board there, or are you a member
No,
of the senior center?
I'm the liaison, just like Fritz is. I attend meetings occasionally. I provide information between the town and employees over there.
Did you resign that position when you became active on the select board?
No.
Were you on the committee over there?
I was on the board for a couple of years, and I just resigned, nothing to do with the select board, I was too busy. And, but,
And is there a board member that is associated with the library as well?
yes. Who is our library contact?
That's me,
Fritz?
but I'm not a voting. I don't think most of the liaison program is not voting. It's
My
only the
one
fire department.
Is by charter of the Wildlife Refuge Park. There's one voting select board member, so that I do vote on.
So it's the wildlife and the fire department are the only two that actually have liaisons per title that vote on the board.
And Thompson's Point
Thompson's
wastewater
Point.
advisory.
yeah, Thompson Point Wastewater.
And, you know, my point is that those are structural parts of the operation of the government. It's not, and that's open to anyone who is a resident and can vote, can also hold that same position. So I don't think it's above and beyond the access of any other citizen. The recommendation from the Municipal Assistance Center on July 13th was, our recommendation is that actual and perceived conflicts should be discussed in public, at least to the extent possible. Some discussion may necessitate executive session, and that the individual with the perceived or actual conflict makes a decision and announces it and the reasoning within that meeting. At that, I'm pretty sure it was at the meeting that you had left, Fritz did make a statement of why he thought this was not a conflict. If it wasn't at that meeting, it was at some meeting, I remember.
There was one previous to that. I know as soon as this issue came up, I mentioned it to both boards, and both boards said they didn't perceive a conflict.
So that I clearly remember, and to me, that was comfortable. I was comfortable with our policy. We've certainly done a lot more digging into the issue. Which I think is all good, especially with the new law coming up. Could be something we're all.
We're ahead of the game, we have a policy.
Well, we're 4/5 of the way there.
Right, we have to have punishment, or there's some term
Yeah.
that we need to add.
Some teeth to the policy. What does it
There's one
say?
change we need to make, and we all need to sign
A
it.
method of enforcement.
Method of enforcement, and the other was brought up in our own policy, we should sign. I was asking if Dean would have a sign-up sheet. All elected and employees of the town should sign that they've read and understand and are complying with. So I think we should do that, because it was written in, what'd you say, 2011, and it's a different select board. Employees in their letter of employment get to see the conflict of interest.
I remember signing it when I got elected.
I remember getting it when I was.
I'm not sure I did, but I'm certainly aware of it, so I'm happy to sign it. That's the other recommendation from
And
the
also
attorney.
goes for appointed. All town
Right.
officers, appointees, or employees.
So I think we ought to have
look at that.
a sign up. I'd say have the policy out with all of us here, there you go, to sign that we've read and understand. Perfect. I don't believe is any action the board wants to take on this topic. We've discussed it. We have council, VLCT council, we have your input, Peter. I don't think anybody want to make any motions, any changes we need to make? Everybody's good? Okay. Thank you.
It wasn't painful for me to be here? Great, thanks.
Now we understand it a lot better.
Have I don't know if you signed off on it, it's just saying it. Okay, we're into select board updates.
Speaking of the library, their expansion program is proceeding. Their feasibility study is completed. They have some goals for raising money. They're of the opinion that they, at this point, don't look like they will get all of it from donation, so they'll want to, I think they've talked to Dean briefly about how to go about bonding and proposing a bond for the balance of what they don't get. There's probably, after the end of the summer, we'll have a more public campaign about the bonding and all the benefits, but they have, they're moving forward. Their feasibility study had favorable results.
They have to be on the next agenda, so they'll be here also to provide a.
They've been doing some fundraisers?
Well, they've been kind of, the
Feasibility study?
the results of their feasibility study said you really need a base amount of money donated before you start the bonding and advertising. If you don't want to start from zero. I don't know what the number is, but that's kind of what they're seeking out this summer. They're looking to the Friends of the Library and to donors to give them that anchor amount of money, and then they will proceed from there.
In the drawings?
Yeah, I have. Seen, they have a model. If anybody's interested, they're more than happy to explain. Stop over there and they'll show you the model and tell you all the reasoning and thoughts that went through the design. The feasibility study also provided a vehicle for public input about, there was a couple things like lighting in the children's area and a couple other issues that got pointed out during the feasibility study. So it's kind of like a public hearing kind of thing, so.
Any other updates? Minutes? Minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes of May 14th as may be amended?
I'll make that motion.
Is that seconded?
I'll second.
On line 14, it's Ben Mason, not Bill Mason. And that comes up on line 54 as well. I saw on line 261, 262. We talked about this tonight. Line 261, 262. A motion to release an RFP for IT computer network support. And I thought, and server at that time. Do you guys agree with that? Networks, and then tonight, we said server, but we modified it, or, equivalent alternative. So line 262, I think it should say and server. That's what I saw.
Could we get a letter written up for SimQuest?
An email, yeah.
That went out, right?
Yep.
Okay.
And that advised them that, rolling 30 days, or what was it?
That we're not automatically renewing and will issue us requests for proposals, then they'll receive one.
Okay. All in favor of the minutes of May 14th as modified? indicate by saying aye.
All right.
Huh?
Abstain?
Abstain, you weren't here. What about, is there a motion for the minutes of May 17th?
Yes.
Second?
Okay. This was that one, just to establish the pay for the beach attendants.
And are we going back to that subject? Is that what we, yes, okay.
We have to look at the long term.
Yeah,
Well, we have to
Before.
decide something before July
July
1st
1st, right.
and beyond.
Okay, anybody have any comments? All in favor of the motion to approve, say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Wait a minute, abstain.
Abstained. There's one warrant here to be signed. Is there any other information to be brought up before the board?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Clear? Aye.
5 minutes late, we're not up by 9 o'clock.
Wow. I actually thought that was gonna be a 10 o'clocker.
Yeah, we were ahead too.